Hi, my name's John Pashley. Recently I spoke at the Reconnect Conference down in Melbourne at the MCG and did a session called Code Like a Native, which is about building native apps using FileMaker as a backend and really teaching FileMaker developers that they already know quite a bit about app development and translating their existing knowledge into building native apps. So this is a re-recording of the session. There was no recording at the event. So just running through this session again so I can share it online. So why would we do this? Like Claris, everyone at this conference is a FileMaker developer. We've got a really powerful tool with Claris, and it does a whole bunch of things. And Claris is a fantastic tool, especially for building internal business apps. So here I've just listed some of the features and benefits that you get out of the box. But sometimes customers expect things that the Claris ecosystem doesn't provide. We can't currently publish to Android. If we want the app running things in the background for us, we don't have access to our local contacts and calendars, or the updating process can be difficult, and those situations where we want high volume number of users using our app just aren't really possible with FileMaker Go. But the good news is we don't have to choose between developing in Claris and developing native apps. We can do both. We can use Claris as a fantastic backend, get all the benefits of rapid application development and data management, business logic, and then we can extend that by developing a native app which connects back to our Claris FileMaker app. So a great platform for building native apps that can talk to FileMaker is called React Native. My goal is to give you some insight into what React Native is and maybe a little bit of confidence to go try it out yourself. So again, hi, my name's John. I've been a FileMaker developer for around 15 years, and along the way I got into web development mainly as a way to try to extend the reach of these FileMaker applications we were building to allow customers to get in there and access and interact with that data as well. I recently started a consulting business called Gen 11, and while I'm not doing those things, you would find me on the soccer field coaching my son's under-8 soccer team. So just to preempt some questions in the comments, yep, Gen 11 is kind of a weird name. It comes from the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. There's this magical car in the movie, and the number plate is Gen 11, and for a long time Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was on the television in our household, and that's kind of what inspired the name. So what is React Native? Well, with React Native you can build native apps on iOS and Android, but also on Mac, Windows, the web, Android TV, tvOS, Vision OS, even the Meta Quest. The apps are written in JavaScript, and we can get them to talk to our FileMaker apps. So React Native, it's a framework by Meta for Facebook, and you've probably used a bunch of React Native apps before and maybe not even realized. So of course, Meta with Facebook, Instagram, Messenger on different platforms use React Native. Microsoft Office on iOS and Android also run React Native to get them on those different platforms. Amazon, Shopify, Tesla run it for their app, and PlayStation. So this is one of the quick-fire sessions, so we've only got a short amount of time, but in the next 10 minutes, I want to give you an intro to building apps in React Native using what you already know about building layouts in FileMaker. We're going to do a demo and show you a React Native app running on 3 different platforms that is pulling data back and forth from FileMaker. So let's go. All right, let's jump into a demo and explain our FileMaker backend. So for this demo, I wanted some sort of app where we've got a small group of people managing something in FileMaker and they want to share that information with a much wider audience. So I wasn't particularly creative this day. I was planning for a conference and I thought, you know what, a conference would kind of fit that. We've got a small group of conference organizers who then want to get those sessions out to a wide range, to a wider audience. And asking your conference attendees to download FileMaker Go and set up the database in there probably wouldn't work for most conferences. So this is our backend. I've got a FileMaker database. I've pulled in all the session details from the Reconnect conference, and we've got our list of sessions and we've got a list of speakers here. Now, we've also got this little demo app over here. You can imagine maybe the conference organizers started putting this together to try to explain what they'd want for their app. So I want to show you how this is put together. So here we are in layout mode, and you can see we've got this header which is just a group of objects. It's got the image in there and the logo and the dates. And then the next one down here is a button bar with our different days that the conference is running. And these are our different buttons in there. And here we've got our portal, which is our list of sessions. And when you tap on one of the days in the button bar, it will filter our portal just to give us those sessions for that day. And we've got our bottom navigation. So this is pretty standard FileMaker layout sort of things. But I wanted to show you this first because we're going to use this as a base for our understanding our native app. So before we do that, let's just take a slight detour. We're going to go up here to Tools, and I'm going to save a copy of this out as XML and have a look at the code that's being produced behind the scenes by FileMaker in layout mode for us. So here's our database, saved as XML. Let's just find our layout. So I called that layout iOS. Let's just find that here. So we've got layout ID with the name of iOS. I've just collapsed down some of these lines to make it easier to read, but you can see I've got a layout with the body part of the layout, and it's got 4 objects just like we saw in the sidebar. We've got our button bar, and we've got our portal here, our day switcher, and our header. And you can kind of open up each of these up to see the hierarchy. Let's just open the header one. Another layout object for our image backgrounds. Then we've got our dates that we had written for the date of the conference and another image for the logo. So the reason I thought it was important to show this is because it's kind of showing you how FileMaker's structuring all of this. You know, it's got this great drag and drop UI builder, but behind the scenes, it's writing all this code for you. And you can see the relationship between each of the objects. We've got a layout, and then these layout objects for a button bar. And then inside that button bar, we've got its children of buttons with all of the options that you set for it. And the reason I thought that was a useful detour is because FileMaker's file structure is XML. And in React and React Native, we're going to be using XML plus JavaScript, which is called JSX. So if we imagine some alternative universe where FileMaker never made the really nice drag and drop layout mode that we have, and we actually had to write this code, what would that look like? And this is kind of what I came up with. We could have our layout, and inside there we have a header component, a button bar component, which we give it its children of different buttons for the different days, and then our portal with our different fields. So in React, these are called components, and it's kind of like what you've been doing in FileMaker all along with the layout objects. But of course, in FileMaker, you can pass in different options to those layout objects. So this is our portal with our portal setup dialog. And in here, you can pick what table you want to load records from and what sort order they should be in and whether you want that alternate row state, all those different options. And so in React, you pass options in the components with something called props, short for properties. So this might be how, for a portal component, you could set up your properties to tell it what table and sort order and all those similar sort of options. This is another example with our button bar because we're adding in our options for which direction we want it to be and the display style, active segment. But of course, button bars have actions on them like perform script. So this example introduces a little bit more of JavaScript into our JSX, where we've got our onClick handler that runs a function called setDateFilter and passes in the dates. So let's go ahead and try it out. Let's try building that layout that we saw in FileMaker in React Native using those ideas. So here we are in our React Native app, and I've created a layout that's similar to what we saw in the slides. We've got our theme view, which is just our layout. That's got a bunch of styles passed into it. We've got a header and a button bar, and you can see we've got the days passed in, but we're using this as a fallback because we're actually getting our date labels from the real data that's being returned by our API. And we've got a portal, and I've given it a whole bunch of props that look similar to the props that you'd see in FileMaker with our table, our options about using alternate row state and allowing delete and those sorts of things. So let's try to run this now. So this project's using a framework called Expo, which gives us a whole bunch of which gives us a really nice development environment to be coding in. So I'll run the start command. And you can see that runs, it gives us a QR code which allows us to test this on a real device using an app they have called Expo Go. And we can also run it in the simulator. So I'm just going to press I for our iOS simulator. And this is really handy because as you code, you can see your changes live. You don't have to run a build every time. So here's our app running in the simulator, and you can see it looks very similar to what we had in FileMaker. We've got a header and a button bar and a portal, or just a list view with all of our different sessions, and we've got our navigation down the bottom. So there's a couple of things to point out is that it doesn't look exactly the same as what we had in FileMaker, and I think that that's actually a feature. You could style it and you could override all the default styles, but just out of the box, it's using all this really nice styling straight from iOS. You can see the tab bar down the bottom with this little liquid glass effect that's there, and we've got that up the top here with our button bar as well. And just to show you how the app works, you can be on a layout here and click a session, and it slides across and shows you the details of the session. Really pretty simple. But let's just play with some of these props. So a FileMaker option that you've got is to use alternate row state. So I'm just going to toggle this to true and hit save. And you can see right away our app updates, and we have a really subtle alternative row state just with a slightly darker gray. So we also have this option of allow delete. Now there'll be different options for how you'd want to have that work, but a common pattern in iOS is to be able to swipe across on the row. It'd be really cool if we had that in FileMaker, but that's how I've made it work in this app. So let's go here to allow delete, let's change that to true, hit save, and now when I'm on one of these sessions, I can scroll across and get a delete option. Again, probably not what you want for a conference app, but kind of a cool feature. So I promised you'd see the app running on different platforms. So here I've got the Android simulator running exact same code, and you can see it's done a really good job. It's got the same interface, but you'll see that there's differences. Whereas we've got the liquid glass tabs on iOS, we don't have that on Android, and that's okay. That they really wouldn't make sense. They wouldn't feel right on Android. So it's using the native tab bar and the native list to render our app for each platform. Now with Expo, you can also run React Native on the web. So back in my editor, I'm just going to hit W on the keyboard. It's going to launch my browser. And now we've got the same code base running on the web. It's just pulled my FileMaker data. And because my Mac is running in dark mode, it's picked that up straight away. And it's giving me a dark mode version. So in React Native, you can have different themes for light mode, dark mode. So we can do the same on iOS and toggle that in dark mode, and you'll see how those styles appear there. So that's by far the biggest advantage of coding with React Native, that you can code once and roll out that code to multiple different platforms, and it uses the native UI elements for each of those platforms so that it works great out of the box. You can even see it's using different icons on each of the different platforms. But let's dig into this a little bit further and see how this is actually working, because at the moment this seems pretty incredible, right? You can code up a React Native app and just use familiar FileMaker terms like button bar and portal and just pass in the props that you already know, and it all just seems to work. Well, that's not quite how it works. So let's dig into this. So we've got our components. If you recall, these are all components. Let's dig into this one called header first, because it's the simplest. So in header, we've got this thing called the theme viewer. This is kind of just what's helping control our styles and light mode and dark mode and things. And then we've got three items in there. Just like we had in FileMaker, we have our image background with a link to our image. I'm throwing a little gradient over the top of that. And then we've got our text and our logo down the bottom here. So you can see our header is a component, and inside there we've got numerous different child components with images and text. So we could take that idea a bit further with the button bar, because of course React Native doesn't have a button bar object, but it does have something called a segmented control, which works very much the same as what we're doing with our button bar. So I've taken segmented control and the props that it has to control its behavior, and I've wrapped it in a new component I've created called button bar. So it's got a familiar FileMaker feel about it to make it easy to explain how components and props work with language you already know. And for portal, I've used the same idea. I've made my own portal component with my own props that feel familiar in FileMaker, and pass those through to control the behavior of the React Native component, which is called a flash list. Flash list is actually a component put out by Shopify. It's just a more performant version of the React Native flat list component. And that's how we're mapping these FileMaker component names to React Native component names. So we've made components that have our FileMaker names and our props, and we're mapping those across to the React Native components so that we can use them. And I thought this was kind of a good metaphor to explain how React Native works. Because under the hood, that's really what React Native is doing to allow us to publish out to iOS, to Android, and to the web with the same code base. So remember in our code, we had things like theme view, which is kind of like like a box around objects or a way to group them. And if you're coding this in iOS, you'd use a UI view, and on the web, you'd be using a div. So behind the scenes, React Native is really just taking those native elements and translating them for you when you run it on those platforms. The same with the flat list down the bottom of this item. We had our portal, which was a wrapper around flat list. And when we build our projects for iOS, it's going to use the native UI table. So it's going to feel fast and responsive because it's a native element. On Android, that's called a recycler view. And on the web, it's just called a unordered list or a UL. And React Native handles the translation to those different native elements for each platform. So that's been a really quick introduction to what React Native is and how FileMaker developers can think about building React Native applications. And we've really just started with the idea of building layouts. But of course, once you get comfortable with building layouts, you can explore all the other things you can do with native apps. And embracing the idea that we don't have to do everything in FileMaker, and to get those features that our users sometimes request, we can embrace other platforms such as React Native to fill those gaps. I hope you enjoyed the session. If you want to learn more about React Native, here's some links up on the screen. Expo was the framework that I was using today. It's great for building out to iOS, Android, and the web, and it has a whole bunch of tools in there for development and deploying to the App Store as well. So I hope you've enjoyed that session today. If you want to learn more about React Native, here's some links you can visit. Reactnative.dev is the official website and documentation, and there's also expo.dev, which is now the recommended framework for getting started with React Native. It gives you a bunch of tools for development like you saw today, but it goes further with really great tools for deploying your app out to the app stores. If you want to get in touch, check out the website gen11.com.au.